Good morning, and thanks for inviting me, and I'm going to talk a little bit about safe operations. You'll want to have a think about this because we're going to go back over some stuff that you already know, and I'm just going to remind you of that. I'm going to remind you of some things that you already know about the industry, in that the industry has always overcome challenges by innovative thinking, whether it's mining difficult ores or difficult jurisdictions or technical challenges to overcome or people training. Right now, the industry is faced with a number of these challenges still, whether it's increasing jurisdictional regulations, whether it's increased demands from the community, whether it's a reduction in capability and loss of talent through to retirement and things like that, whether it's the fact that we have aging assets, increasing costs, whether they're input costs or operating costs. All of these things are impactful, and quite frankly, the industry is looking at a number of solutions to overcome these, one of which is looking at technology. Another one is looking at how they engage with people. So we've done a number of projects in the last little while that looked at how do we create safe operations. So hands up, how many people start every meeting and every day with a safety share? That's good practice. And why do you do that? One of the reasons that we look at safety is that we're trying to get people to think about risk and how to manage risk. We're looking at how people look at engaging with their environment and with their other people. The future of mining is really a safe operations solution. And in a lot of cases, we're, to a certain extent, looking at how do we take safety and apply it into the operations, so not only create safer operations, but more productive operations. The challenge of increasing costs and increasing input costs and things like that can be overcome by how we manage the operation and, quite frankly, how people work together. So what's really interesting is that there was a safety survey done last year across a number of executives across a number of industries. 95% of those executives reported that a positive impact on financial performance, that safe work and safe operations, if you will, impacts positively employee morale, absenteeism, productivity, competitiveness, and of course profits. So I'm just reminding you that we all know that safety is important, and that it can have a positive impact, and it can have a positive impact quickly. The studies also show that safe work, when you plan work, and you plan it at a detail level, planned work is 10 times more productive and 3 times less likely to result in an accident or incident. So what we're really talking about here is that we have a lot of positive concepts around safety and how people interact with each other. The next step really is planning. Now, if we're going to say that planned work is actually safer, more productive, reduces costs, and reduces incidents, you're all saying to yourselves, well, we're planning work. So it's at what detail level are we planning? The difference that we're talking about here, and we've recently had a couple of terrific results in looking at moving the complexity out of the operation, out of that day-to-day, execution profile, and moving it into the planning profile. That requires a couple of things. It requires a change in the planning horizon, so you're planning work a lot earlier, and you're planning it at a detail level. So the concept to think about is not planning so much as choreography. In mining, you share time and space. Those are shared resources between the operations people, the technical people, everybody in that mine, whether it's an open pit or underground. We're all sharing the same time and space. If you're going to share time and space, in order to plan, you have to plan at a detailed level that allows us to understand where everybody and where all those moving parts are constantly. So I'd like you to think more about choreography than planning. In a lot of cases, and this is not a bad thing, we plan based on what happened in the last shift. So the miners come up from underground or they come in, they report back, the two supervisors have a cross-shift handover, and we talk about what are we doing. And in a lot of cases, that type of mining style is really just looking at trying to do the same thing continuously. But that also means that we're solving the same problems continuously. So when you're trying to plan at a detailed level, you're trying to remove those common things that you're reacting to and move them into the planning and plan them out. Here's an example from a book by Robert Hafele, who talks about applying lean culture or lean concepts to a safety culture. The difference here is to look at repetitive processes and break them down into their sequence steps, and then look at how to best do them. That's a great idea, but one of the things that it talks about here in lean is really trying to change mining into a manufacturing process, and how does safety work within that? Safe operations. We move the complexity and risk out of execution and into the task planning. Now, I think that we're all sort of familiar with that. You have to look across the entire value chain so that you don't get into the local optimization versus global optimization issues. If you're going to look at the global optimization, then it's okay in some cases to have higher costs in some areas to benefit the actual production of ore or concentrate. So an example would be if you have a highly volatile ore body that has a high degree of percentage sulfur, if it's a sulfide ore body or something like that, and you're using an autoclave or pressure oxidized a catalyst system autoclave to reduce the sulfur, that variability affects that process plant. If you're going to manage that variability, you have to change the way that you blend ores. In a local optimization effort, you would look at the number of the cost per ton. You'd look at the operating cost per ton. You'd say, well, I don't want to rehandle the ores because that will increase my cost per ton over here. Yes, but what's happening is that you're not processing. You have high degree of variability in your process plant caused by the percentage of sulfur. So that's the example of local versus global optimization. That's also the example that if you're going to plan, you have to look at planning across that entire value chain. The concept of safe is fast and fast is smooth. I've been a consultant for 30 years. Most of that's in mining. Most of the solution that we're looking for or that we help operators deal with is reducing volatility within their organization. The variability or volatility is something that you have to react to. That's what an organization is designed to do. In a lot of cases, what the management operating system is doing, what the short interval control is doing is it's trying to identify variability quickly and react to it quickly. That makes your organization volatile. It makes it very reactive because as soon as you see a problem, you're supposed to react to it. And so you end up with a lot of supervisors and managers that are planning the same way that they planned, but what they're doing is they're getting really good at reacting, which is fine. That's good. You definitely want to react when you have a problem. But what the emphasis is on, for a lot of cases, it's on the short interval control is causing you to focus more on the reaction. That's creating a culture, and that's also creating a behavior. The way that the organization is finding problems and reacting to it, then the organization rewards that and says, hey, that was great. You found that problem, you reacted to it. Fantastic. So I guess it's a victim of its own success to a certain extent. What we're trying to do when we're talking about safe operations is by planning work across the entire value chain, You're reducing variability, and you're reducing the need to react. That's a different behavior. It's a different concept. What if I were to tell you that we went through an organization and we planned 100% of the work a week in advance and got 90% compliance to that? You can imagine that then had an impact on volatility, it had an impact on variability, it had a great impact on if you know that planned work is 10 times more productive, it had a huge impact on profitability and productivity. And that was with a new workforce. Now, actually, you could argue that it was actually easier to do with a new workforce because we didn't have to break a lot of habits. This integrated planning approach is taking the entire view across the value chain. It's looking everything from the system capability, time and space, shared time and space issues. Those are both constraints that have to be managed. Whether it's the management of the constraint within the process or the management of the constraint within the mining, lateral development or open pit. And then it's looking at the activity sequencing. Now, in a lot of cases, organizations are trying to deal with the high cost, high labor issues, all that complexity with technology. That's great, absolutely. In a lot of cases, the technology is coming into the planning phase. Fantastic. Really good. But unless we change how we deal, what our concept of planning is, and how we deal with time and space issues, we're not really going to leverage the total potential of the technology. And so the culture side of technology is really important. So don't just focus on the plan, do, check, act. That's important, but that can also create the volatility. One of the things about technology and how we're dealing with it right now in the organizations is that in a lot of cases, the technology that we see, and by the way, we've done digital solutions for big aviation organizations, for multi-location medical clinics, for oil and gas people, and in a lot of cases the technology is fit for purpose, but we're not leveraging what it is because we're not getting the people side, but we're also not getting the organization side. So here's Martek's law. It's sort of an interesting concept. It talks about how technology change is exponential. That's that yellow or orange line. And our capability to create organizational improvement is linear. So we're constantly dealing with a gap between our ability to create change within an organization and the challenges or the opportunities that technology presents. And so now what we're going to talk about is what we're going to say, when we're talking about safe operations and improving NPV and doing that quickly, that actually requires you to not only change the way that you're thinking about things like planning, but it also means that you change the way that you deal with your people and their ability to affect and create change. How are we doing so far? Show of hands. Good. Okay. Maybe I should speed up. Safe operations promotes an agile organization. I'm telling you things that you know. The ability to create change and move decision-making down to the front line, helping people to engage, but helping people to align with organizational objectives, helps people to adopt the information, and it accelerates the change program. There's some enablers of rapid adaptation of change, which is the number one management misunderstood or maybe misapplied or misrecognized management capability, effective communication. managers who can communicate are far more successful at achieving the outcomes that they're trying to achieve. If they can have a person-to-person, an effective person-to-person conversation, a transaction to create alignment, they are much more effective. This is an understood capability. It's an under-recognized capability. It's not one of the things that we promote people for necessarily. Barriers to rapid adaptation of new technology: habit, organizational habit, and individual habit. 40% of everything that we do on a daily basis is based on our personal habits. And that also, to a certain extent, speaks to organizational habit. When we see a problem, how do we look at it? What's the data set that we use to assess it? Who comes up with the solution? Again, that's a little bit talking about the alignment of people. If we, and as well, our preponderance towards waiting for a problem to present itself and then solving that problem. Those are all habits. Those habits are something that you can change. You can change the culture of an organization. You can change an organization that has had, whether it's safety or operational issues, you can change that, but you have to be deliberate. Again, talking about the integrated planning process, the number one thing that you want to start off with when you start planning is you want to align and integrate. We want to understand what is the objective that we're planning for. Is it uptime? Is it throughput? Is it reduction in cost? What is it that we are planning for? What are we going to subjugate the rest of the operation to achieve? When we were working with Rio Tinto's $5.4 billion solution or mine in Oyu Tolgoi, we developed an integrated planning process that talked about what is best for the project. That was a really interesting organization. It's underground, so you have shaft logistics that you have to manage. There's a shared time and space type of thing. We started planning 10-hour shifts as opposed to the 8-hour shifts that were routine in the rest of the organization at Rio Tinto. We increased productivity so that lateral development was increased above plan. But, and this is a lot of Rio Tinto's work, and they won the President's Safety Award on a project. So they had the lowest AFIR in the region, and it started off with alignment. In one case, we were going to do a mass excavation for the underground crusher, but we said, and this was in advance, this was like 3 weeks in advance, we said, but hold on, let's just look at whether or not we have some place to put that rock. Do we have some way to extract it? And we said no, so the mine stopped that. Now, understand that that at that point in time, that was really an inflection point because of the construction guys, Jacobs and all those people were saying, but this is critical path, we have to do this. And then we had the development guys and the production guys, and we said, yeah, but we're looking at what's best for project. And what's best for project right now is that we do this other stuff and not this stuff. So that's what safe operation starts off with. It starts off with alignment. What are we trying to achieve and how are we working together? Here's some of the examples and a happy Oyu Tolgoi underground team. 1 million man-hours worked per month with the best all injury frequency rate. That's great. It's a given to have safe operations. That's table stakes. It's something that you have to start with. But it has a fantastic impact in terms of accomplishments. Applying some different thinking, they were able to achieve a 43% improvement in shaft sinking rates. Now, they weren't doing it themselves. They were working with a shaft sinking contractor, but they influenced the shaft sinking contractor around how to manage work within the shift and across shifts. So that created a reduction in the shaft sinking schedule of 61 days, increased some inhalation that allowed them to achieve some lateral development above plan. That's great. All of that is fantastic. And by the way, each day of improvement was a $2 million bottom line improvement to the NPV, which over 61 days, you guys can do the math. So that's safe operations impacting productivity. And the number one thing that we started off with was let's really understand and align around how we're working together and what are we trying to achieve. Sounds simple. A recent client engagement, this is after 10 weeks. 10 weeks of working with a client to focus on engagement, safe operations, planning in advance, planning at a detailed level, thinking about choreography as opposed to reactivity. 32% increase in tons to surface in 10 weeks with a $20 million annualized benefits. Operationally, 43% reduction in cycle time, zero harm to the workers. So faster, more productive is safer. 40% reduction in workplace incidents, 55% improvement in lost time, which is where you have to stop the operation because you don't have the next piece or there's a lack of alignment. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. There is a question.
John, you put a lot of emphasis on safety. Safety was probably 20, 30-year cultural change in our industry. And what we've succeeded in doing in safety is really impressive.
I agree.
It's become part of the DNA, it's part of the lifestyle, it's part of the activity, it's part of the culture. Have you seen anybody who's doing that for innovation?
So what we're trying to do is we're trying to say safety is a journey, and for the most part we increased safe operations. We've changed the way that people work together. I think that the innovation is almost requires us to step back and look at our organization and not just say, okay, well, we're here. Where are the next steps? Oh, they must be over there. No, I think that there's still a huge opportunity by expanding concepts. So innovation is happening every day in the organization. I think that what we're seeing is small change as opposed to big change. The big change, the really resistant area to innovation right now isn't an application of technology. It's really things like the cultural side of local optimization, silo thinking versus the value chain. One of the things that mining and to a certain extent EPCMs are still dealing with is that while we have a lot of learnings about projects and how projects are managed and construction of facilities, whether it's brownfield or greenfield, we're not necessarily applying those. So I think that innovation, there's still tons of opportunity. The innovation culture is not to the same degree developed as the safety culture. So I think that we still have, I think that the mining industry can still be very proud of the innovations that it's brought to the table, and there's still a lot more room. Speed of adoption is critical. Because that, to a certain extent, gives people a success or failure. One of the things that what we see, whether it's in the mining industry, there's lots of other industries that have gone through technology. Some of the best learnings around application and take-up of digital technology is in the aviation industry. Whether their cost pressures were different or whether they just had propensions for technology to begin with, you're starting to see, or the types of solutions that we are trying to apply are the learnings that we learned from aviation, whether it's on the maintenance side or the operations side. So I think that the mining opportunities, oil and gas is going through the same thing. Oil and gas is a little bit further ahead. You can see pulp and paper and sawmills being run by operators with central control for a number of pulp and paper digester mills being centralized into one space. So, if you look at pulp and paper, if you look at oil and gas, they've gone through that first curve in technology whereby people have the technology. They're now all wired in. Now we're talking about how we use data. I think mining is still on that curve. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. You've been a very generous audience.